Good evening, everybody. Welcome into another show. I am John Kurtz, and tonight we tackle the college football playoff. To begin, we are on the precipice of the initial 12-team college football playoff, which will start on Friday night. It's going to be great. I am very much looking forward to it, and all eyes in Big 12 country will be on what is going to happen between Clemson and Texas. And really, as I always frame this show as being a non-Power 2 show, the eyes of the ACC will also be on that game. Of course, so will the eyes of Texas, blah, blah, blah. They're upon us. You know that whole spiel. But which path would be better for Clemson? Which path would be better for the Big 12 to try and make a real statement in this thing? Is it going to be playing Clemson if Clemson were to upset Texas? Or the flip side, would it be playing Texas if they win, as many expect that they will, and you get a higher upside but more difficult game to play? And we also have a bit of breaking news on the availability of one of Arizona State's best players, certainly their best defender. So that's where I want to start today. But as you can see on the lovely rundown, thank you to freelancer.com for helping me get this great graphic that we've been using lately. We got some good Big 12 TV news. Now, it's not in the most traditional sense here, all right? You're going to see where I'm going with this, but it's going to tie in everything that's happening right now in college football, which, of course, is, well, predominantly the transfer portal. We've got legal stuff, Diego Pavia, that ruling, all of that. But focusing in here on transfer portal and how that can actually really affect Big 12 TV ratings. I talked a lot about it the other night. Texas Tech just continues to add guys. Texas Tech has really no excuse from a personnel standpoint, certainly, to not win the league next year, the way that they are attacking this portal and attacking this offseason. So credit to them. Pay cuts in the Big 12 and across college football. The league is actually kind of a trendsetter right now in pay cuts, which is not something that you see often in college football. We've got a new realignment fear unlocked. If you are somebody that lives in any sort of realignment fear, just meaning you are not one of the elite brands, that's basically what it is. If you are not one of the elite brands, we've got a new fear for you based on something that happened today. So pretty newsy time, to be completely honest, in college football here at the moment. And we'll break it all down. I dug up, shout out to Josh Pate, who does this, dug up some old bold predictions from you guys at the beginning of the college football season. And actually, I was impressed. More good ones than I imagined, but I have some good and bad to get to if we have time tonight. That's the rundown of the show. You guys know, those of you who have been here before, how exactly to get involved tonight. Fill up the chat room if you are on YouTube. Obviously, very easy to do that. If you're on Twitter, I would suggest heading over to YouTube, just John Kurtz on YouTube, in order to do that. And then once you're in there, if you want to guarantee that your question or comment makes it on the show tonight, you can click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. We'll create a super chat, and I appreciate everybody who supports in that way. Totally understand if you can't. There are other ways to support the channel. One, just by liking the video, totally free. And I appreciate anybody and everybody who does that. Let's see. You can also add a question or comment on Venmo. If you are not catching this live, it is John-Kurtz-4. To do that, leave a question or comment with your donation there. I will kick off the next show with it, and I've got one of those for you in just a moment. But the other thing, of course, the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter is rocking and rolling. We've got over 3,200 subscribers across Big 12 countries. So if you want your Big 12 news without Big 10 or SEC bias, and you want it multiple times a week to your inbox for free, you can sign up at ofbnews.com or click the link in the description of this video. That's the housekeeping that I've got for you. Let's start with Bob. Bob, BYU fan, I can tell from Bob's picture here on Venmo, John-Kurtz-4. Bob says, Merry Christmas, John, and thanks for another great year of Big 12 sports news. Well, thank you, Bob. Merry Christmas to you as well. Does it seem like the fan bases, which are complaining the loudest about A.J. DeBonsta, are from schools with a reputation for cheating? Thinking of UNC and Bama, KU fans seem okay with it. That's interesting. I have not followed that recruitment closely enough to really pay attention to people complaining in the aftermath of it. I will just say this, Bob, if Alabama is like complaining about, I imagine it would be complaints about like money whipping here because of how much it was reported that BYU paid. Alabama should not be complaining about any of that. They, over the last couple of years, have money whipped guys away from K-State. For instance, Aaron Estrada a couple of years ago. Second time this guy's been brought up today. We were talking about it on the 3 Mob podcast earlier that seemed to be one of the recruitments that really altered Jerome Tang's whole strategy and shifted toward this, hey, we've got to use NIL and we've got to generate more NIL support than what we have. It was because after the run with Marquise Noel, he thought he had Aaron Estrada lined up as his next point guard, and everybody was predicting that. You know, all the crystal balls at that time were basically putting him at K-State, and then at the last minute, Alabama comes in throwing in cars and houses and a really extravagant offer, and they get him, and Alabama goes to a Final Four. Alabama should shut the hell up. They should not be complaining about any of that. Alabama doing a lot of whining right now because they were doing whining about losing guys in the portal too, and like, oh, what a travesty. And it's, yeah, welcome to it, Alabama. You just have not dealt with it yet because you had Nick Saban as your head coach. North Carolina, I will be honest, I don't know enough at all about the North Carolina fan base. I have not had too many interactions or run-ins with them, so I don't really have a great take there other than to say they are probably just very frustrated in general because that basketball program, ever since making the national championship game appearance a couple of years ago, not really been up to snuff. And I know that they're having a bit of a tough year. So I would say bleep the haters, Bob. AJ DeBonsta is going to play at BYU. He's going to be fantastic. And BYU is making a major statement with that, the investment that they are utilizing NIL-wise in basketball, hopefully in football too, just across the board. So I would not worry about it. But I appreciate your comment. Hope you have a great holiday season, Bob, and enjoy the next couple of weeks. Okay. I'm looking at Pace and Cougar fans comment there in the chat. We'll see if that ties into Pace and Cougar fan, where you think I am going with this. I have a similar sentiment in a way to where you're going with that. Okay. So Arizona State is not playing in the college football playoff this week. They've got some time to wait, but if you're a Big 12 fan, if you're an Arizona State fan, you are certainly hoping that the league via the Sun Devils can make a big statement in the college football playoff. So what is the path for that? What is the best path for the Big 12 to make the biggest statement, get the most out of this college football playoff experience? And the first question I will ask with that is simply like, what should you be rooting for? This is kind of my stab at like a Big 12 fans viewing guide, rooting guide for this weekend. You've got Clemson against Texas, and I think the knee-jerk easy reaction for a lot of people would be, well, I'm going to root for Clemson because, one, I don't like Texas, and two, that would give Arizona State an easier game in the quarterfinals when they go play. Understandable. I get why that would be your initial take, but I do think it bears diving a little bit deeper. And I also might actually suggest it may not matter at all. It may not matter at all which team it is. And this is where Pace and Cougar fan, I think I might be on a bit of the same wavelength as you there. But again, you've got two paths here. Is it a Clemson win? Okay. First of all, can Clemson win? Yes, I think Clemson can. I think the most encouraging thought along that line is that, well, Texas just doesn't have like a super explosive offense that's like running away from people on a regular basis. Not seeing a lot of that out of the Longhorns these days. In fact, there's still just a lot of discussion about Arch Manning at quarterback and whether or not Texas needs to utilize him more. I was listening to a preview of that game earlier today, and that was a big part of the conversation. Hey, like, Quinn Ewers has just been okay this year, certainly has been a far cry from the Heisman candidate he was built up to be. Do they need to start going to Arch more? That is a sign that the offense is not totally humming. If you're talking about using your backup quarterback, I don't care who he is, I don't care what the last name is. If you're talking about trying to use a second quarterback at this point in time. That's an offense that's not really going to pull away from people. Texas is led by defense. But if you are led by defense, that could get you into more defensive slugfests and just keep a team around longer and open yourself up to more variables about, whatever craziness could happen, whatever bounce one way or the other could happen in a game. I would also say, though, here is something else. This is something else the positive can. I almost started to move forward a little bit too quickly there. The positive camp for a Clemson win. Texas has not beaten a team that is definitively better than Clemson the entire season. And that's not me saying that Clemson is some kind of world beater either. But if we're looking at their wins this year, Texas A&M, probably a pretty good comp, I would say, to about the same level, the same caliber of team, not necessarily stylistically how they're built or anything. But if you're talking about caliber of team, I feel like Clemson and Texas A&M are pretty similar. Texas got that win. It was not a dominant performance by any stretch of the imagination. What did I just say about a team led by defense and you can keep a team around in a game? It's kind of what happened with A&M. Now, they won the game, but that's the sort of thing that I'm thinking here, the type of game that could play out and give Clemson at least a puncher's chance. I do, however, think a couple of things with Clemson here. One, they sort of just got the SMU game handed to them, in my humble opinion. I think they were basically they were, in essence, gifted 14 points to start the game. SMU was shaky. And once they got spotted that big lead, they were just holding on for dear life. It felt like most of the rest of the game, or at least right down to the end, they were really holding on for dear life in that game. So I'm not even 100% convinced that Clemson really is that much better than SMU. SMU may have just not been quite ready for the stage with the way that ACC championship game started. That's why I don't have a lot of confidence that Clemson is going to win the game, but it bears discussing here what would be better. What should you be rooting for? I think from a winnability standpoint, it is very clear that Clemson would be the option here. You would want to play Clemson for sure. Just a couple of weeks ago, right before that SMU game, everyone recognized, hey, yeah, of course, Clemson's got a shot to make it to the college football playoff, but nobody was really bullish on them or super gung-ho about it after they lost to South Carolina, really ever since the Louisville loss, which is like a month ago at this point. People have been sort of out on Clemson. The narrative on them was way out after the Georgia game. People started to come back in. They were blowing teams out for a while there. You're like, all right, maybe Clemson actually isn't that bad. Then they lose the Louisville game the way that they did at home, and it was like, all right, well, yeah, Clemson ain't it. So people were out. It's just now after a win where they got spotted 14 points that we're starting to come back in a little bit on them. My other thought with that is if you're talking about winnability in a game in a quarterfinal against Arizona State, that would be at that point Clemson. You're asking Clemson, this team that everybody thought was not it, you're asking them to win 3 straight elimination games against Power 4 conference champion caliber teams. SMU obviously did not win that championship game, but by virtue of being in the title game, they were of Power 4 conference champion caliber, I would say. Okay? So if you are thinking that Clemson has it in the tank to win 3 straight games like that against that sort of competition, beating SMU, Texas, and then Arizona State, I don't know, man. I don't think that's happening for Dabo this year. This is not 2017. Deshaun Watson is not walking through that door. Hunter Renfrow is not walking through that door. And especially when today we got news that the appeal for Shamari Simmons' first half was a no-go. That's worse news for Arizona State in that quarterfinal game. If you missed it or had forgotten, Shamari Simmons is Arizona State's best defender. He got the targeting call by hitting Rocco Becht in the Big 12 championship game. Kenny Dillingham appealed it, trying to say that, hey, looking at where the quarterback kind of turned his head last minute, that was the reason the hit wound up going the way that it did. The appeal did not work out, and because it was in the second half of that Big 12 championship game, you got to miss the first half of the next game. That's a killer. That's a killer. When you combine it with Jordan Tyson being out on the offensive side of the ball, Arizona State will have to be playing that game without two of its best players. So winnability seems to be pretty important there. Clemson, come on down. Shamari Simmons, by the way, leading in tackles for loss, fourth in tackles, three forced fumbles, a pick. Guy is a really good all-around player and defender. However, if we're going to take winnability and put it to the side and say, hey, shoot your shot, John, this is a conference. Brett Yormark is big, bold, brash. Shoot your shot. Go for it, man. Well, Texas offers that sort of opportunity because, man, revenge factor for the conference if you get that game, right? Texas last year walked out of the league jeering your commissioner while winning the Big 12 title for the first time in a decade and a half. You've got a chance to get them back if you get them in that sort of a game. And the same thing that I said about Texas keeping teams around because they're so much more led by defense and that offense is not spectacular, that principle would apply if they're playing Arizona State too. So it's not the worst case scenario if you're going to get one of the teams in the more favorite tier of the college football playoff who spent some time at number one this year. You also are definitely, if we're thinking about what this does for the conference, you are definitely going to get more national respect for beating a bigger name program and a team that I said was number one for a good chunk of the year. And it would be an SEC playoff win. And what do we hear all the time, right? We went through this whole thing talking about playoff buys and who's getting into the playoff and Alabama and all that, and how many hypothetical games against Big 12 teams were played, or even ACC teams. ACC, if you want to jump in on this too. How many hypothetical games were played through people's tweets and people's minds, whatever, a lot, and the SEC won every single one of them. We know that the SEC has never lost a hypothetical game. It has never happened. Well, now you get them in a real game. You can get them in a real game in the playoff. Nobody can say anything about, it's a bowl game. We didn't care. All that crap's out the window. You would have them mano-a-mano in the playoff when it really counts. You would have an opportunity to get the SEC there. And as much as we would like to say, well, it is, this Power 2 thing and beating the Big Ten would be valuable. Yes, I mean, certainly, if you wound up playing Ohio State or something in the playoff, yes, there's value there. But TCU beat Michigan in the playoff a couple of years ago, and nobody seems to remember or talk about it. Nobody talks about it or gives the league any real credit for it at all. Unfortunately, it is not really created equal. The SEC wins seem to do more for you because of how everybody feels about the league and the pedestal that it is put on. So that offers a wealth of opportunity for the league. It is undoubtedly, if you are the type of person that is high risk, high reward, take your shot, shoot or shoot kind of a thing, that's going to be the way you would want to go. Here's the problem, though. As I mentioned, I just don't know that it really matters for Arizona State and the Big 12 in terms of how much respect they're going to generate. And it's because, as I just told you, TCU beat Michigan a couple of years ago in the college football playoff. They were the only team to beat Michigan for almost almost 2 calendar years by the time this season kicked off. And yet it didn't matter. Nobody talked about it. Now, I know I can hear everybody screaming. Any SEC fan that's still left around here that's been mad about the video titles and all that the last few weeks, anybody that's still in here is screaming at their screen. 65-7, John. That's why nobody remembers TCU in 2022 beating Michigan. Yeah, I get it. The national championship game being the way that it was is all that anybody remembers and will talk about. And they will write off Michigan as a fluke. There were the people that were trying to throw out the narrative like, sign stealing. They had reversed what Michigan was doing, and TCU had Michigan signs and all this stuff. They'll find ways to discount that if you get walloped by the SEC, and that's what happened. So a lot of this is just going to depend on how does Arizona State go out? Do they bow out gracefully, competitively when they bow out, even if they do win a quarterfinal game? That would be what truly tells the tale. I feel like you could beat Clemson, you could beat Texas. We saw Michigan is one of the biggest brands in the sport. Maybe not quite to the level of Texas right this moment, but I don't know. We give Texas so much brand credit. Michigan won the national championship last year. So you beat Michigan. You beat Michigan, and it didn't matter. It may not matter even if you beat Texas, and then in the next round, you got blown out. It will come down to how gracefully you go out. And you're looking at Oregon, Ohio State, or Tennessee in that next game. If you were to get blasted by one of those teams, it's probably all people would talk about, and it would not matter either way. Where do I stand on all this? Like, what would I personally be rooting for? It is just almost impossible for me to look at Texas. The opportunity for Texas to fall flat and lose a home playoff game in the first round to Clemson, a team that, again, nobody thought was going to be there in the playoff, and lose to Dabo and get to see Dabo make some statement at the end of the game where, he equates, he will make up a new moniker, like, the NIL thing that everybody has always made fun of, and equating it to his love for Jesus and all that, which that is totally fine. It's always funny how Dabo finds ways to make kitschy little statements like that. If he were doing that at DKR, that'd be great. I can't root against that. So I will be rooting for Clemson, but I fully recognize that the better play for me in the end would be Arizona State beating Texas. So that's where I'm at. Curious where you're at. Let me know in the comments. Keep filling up that comment section. We have a lot more people in here than we did just a moment ago, so I appreciate everybody who is here. A couple of reminders. If you're on Twitter, hop over to YouTube, John Kurtz on YouTube, and you can participate in the chat. Those of you who are here, click the $ below the chat box to create a super chat, which will guarantee that what you say makes it onto the show tonight. Appreciate everybody who does that. Totally free way to support the channel is just to like the video. That's always great and would be amazing. Make sure you're subscribed if you are not. That all really helps as well. So thank you to everybody who does that. And subscribe to my Big 12 newsletter, Open for Business, ofbnews.com, to join the 3,200 plus Big 12 fans who already do subscribe and get Big 12 news without SEC or Big 10 bias straight to their inbox multiple times per week. With that, Starter 179, one of our resident Red Raiders around here. Appreciate you, Starter 179. What Tech continues to do in the portal this week is unreal. They have accumulated a ton of talent the last 3 days. They have. I'm glad you brought it up, because even though I did talk about it at length on Sunday's show, they've continued to add more. Like, it's every time I look up and open the Twitter app, Texas Tech is adding somebody else. They currently have the number 2 portal class in the country, right behind Ole Miss. And it's pretty neck and neck here. I'm looking at this is according to 24/7 Sports. 5 4-star players for both, 6 3-stars for Tech, 5 3-stars for Ole Miss. You start looking at this, like Lee Hunter was a huge one from UCF, defensive tackle. That came in yesterday. Terrence Carter was a tight end from Louisiana. There was a 4-star player in the portal, according to 24/7. That came in yesterday. Just today, where did I see it? Anthony Holmes Jr., that's a defensive lineman from Houston that transferred to Texas Tech. So they're raiding the hell out of the Big 12, even with all of this. They got Mitch Griffiths, a backup quarterback, to throw into the mix too, as a little Baron Morton insurance, which seems important, right? How often has Tech dealt with quarterback injuries? All the time. That, I would tell you, was one of the more important moves K-State made last year in the transfer portal. Taquan Roberson helped get them their biggest win of the year. Avery Johnson got hurt for part of a drive against Colorado. Taquan Roberson, veteran quarterback that they paid for in the portal, came in calmly, finished off a touchdown drive, and K-State won. Best win they had all year in Boulder. Like, that can be very important. Texas Tech has hit this out of the park. I was talking to a Tech fan earlier today about this. You cannot ask for anything more out of Texas Tech's offseason. 2 really widely respected coordinator hires. Nothing bad, really, you can say about those on paper. They were sought after. They had to beat out competition to get them, and they did. Transfer portal, literally, outside of, I guess, Ole Miss, you could not ask for more for what they have done in the portal. It's fantastic. Expectations are going to be high for Tech. This will probably, I would imagine, be a lot like a couple of years ago when they were a relatively popular pick to win the league. And that is with good reason based on the talent that they have accumulated and the momentum that they have with Joey McGuire not letting that thing completely crater after a rough start this year. My caveat is the same. It's starter 179. I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. I'm just going to supplement it a little bit this time. You got to produce the results at the end of the day. I will not predict Texas Tech to win a Big 12 championship until I see them at least play for a Big 12 championship, because I was burned 2 years ago in predicting them to win it, and they have not had a 9-win season since 2009. It's just a program that I need to see do it. And you can say, portal's been great. I realize that. Is it on another level from the past couple of years? Yeah, probably so. But it's still been pretty damn good the last few years. And all I heard each of the last 2 off seasons was Tech fans telling me how awesome they are going to be. And instead, they've merely been solid, which is fine. But you got to actually take that step forward on the field. The portal is great. Florida State thought they had an amazing portal class heading into this year. They went 2-10. So sometimes the pieces don't fit. Sometimes things are clunky. I think the odds of that happening are very, very slim, in large part because you're not going to have a quarterback as bad as DJ Uyunglele was this year. So check mark on that. But I would also say, look, you guys know I'm a K-State guy. I'm in the midst of watching the third most expensive basketball roster in the country right now be 6-4 against a pretty weak non-conference schedule so far this year, where pieces just are not fitting. And a guy has already left. You've had problems with buy-in. There are lots of issues that can come with throwing around as much money as Tech is in the portal right now. You got to prove that you can manage those. You've got to prove that these pieces actually fit together and that you can coach them up and make it all work. And the problem for Joey McGuire has never been on the talent accumulation side. It's been more on the how's the execution actually going to come to fruition on the field. And by problem, I just mean in terms of getting to a Big 12 championship level, because Joey McGuire has clearly already raised Texas Tech's level as a program overall. They're going all in. I love it. You found your donor who wants to make it happen. That's amazing. There was a great message board geniuses post earlier today of a Texas A&M fan on TexAgs who was like, we've got to stop this. This is crazy. How could a one person have such an impact on things that affect so many people in the state? It might have been the least self-aware statement that's ever been made by anybody when he's a fan of a school that paid Jimbo Fisher $70+ million to go away just 2 years ago. How I get less than that, I guess, just over a year ago, they paid Jimbo Fisher $70+ million to go away. How do you have that little self-awareness in making that sort of a statement? I digress. I love putting the Aggies in some flux there, Tech fans. I'm with it. I just can't fully buy in on Big 12 champion until I see it. But Tech's been great. Tech's been great in the portal for sure. That worked out pretty well, man. We got the Tech stuff in that I really wanted to get in. So I would say there's some big news here on the TV front for the Big 12, which is important as ever. We all hail our Big 12, our college football TV overlords, okay? They rule everything in college football, so TV numbers mean lifeblood in the sport. And we now know that the league's number one TV attraction in the Big 12 is, still going to be a major attraction unless I do think that there is one new development here that could stop it. So I'm going to start with the good and then get to the potentially bad, potentially negative. And this will be polarizing because one of the next words and or phrases out of my mouth is going to be Coach Prime. That is a very polarizing thing in the league. But love him or hate him, he is the Big 12's number one TV ratings drawer. And that was proven over the course of this year. Colorado drew huge ratings throughout the season. They were still close to 4 million per game this year in terms of average viewership. It's not quite what it was for the first month and a half when they were averaging 8 million in the Pac-12 the previous year when it was totally completely new and everybody was loving it up. Colorado still drew really damn well, and it was a huge asset to the league as far as that goes. I just talked on Sunday about how, hey, I really think with what Prime can sell based on getting Travis Hunter the Heisman, he's got some staying power, and it's not just going to be like, hey, he's up and out. Right now, we only have one major-ish job open in college football, and it is Washington State. More on that later on in the show. But it looks like Prime's going to be at Colorado. I guess people would come back and say, well, see what happens with the Cowboys. Okay, fair enough. But it looks like Prime is going to be at Colorado again. And now the news part of this is he's got a commitment at quarterback, and it's a big one. Caden Salter from Liberty, dual threat guy, great with his legs, great with his arm, took Liberty to the Fiesta Bowl last year. Numbers dipped, team dipped a bit this year, but still a really talented, highly sought-after portal quarterback. And you might say, well, John, didn't Coach Prime already have a big-time quarterback? Yes, he did. He has already landed five-star quarterback Julian Lewis, stole him away from USC. That's the number 2 overall player in the transfer portal, according to ESPN, or a high school player, rather, according to ESPN. So Prime has added 2 high-profile QBs. It would seem that they're going to be in pretty damn good hands handing that thing off from Shedeur Sanders. And that's the most important thing to making them a valuable TV entity. You're going to need star power, but really you need a quarterback to make that thing run. It took some time to get the rest of the whole engine humming, but when they had a quarterback and some weapons out wide, that could carry them quite a ways in terms of not even just what's happening on the field, but entertainment value. The entertainment value piece of this seems to be really checked off with what Colorado's done at quarterback, getting both of these kids to come in. I think this is very good news in terms of Colorado continuing to be something that will draw on TV. There probably will continue to be some diminishing returns on it, as it's not quite as novel anymore when it becomes Coach Prime's third year in college football. But this is still a very good sign that it's not going to completely fall off without Shedeur and Travis, both in terms of what they're actually doing on the field and in terms of how to make an entertaining product. Because this is all about TV, how to make an entertaining show, get a magnetic coach that's a lightning rod for criticism and love, guy that everybody loves to hate. You need high-profile players that people know. A sexy offense certainly helps. And I think the chances of them having a sexy offense again next year raised considerably when they add Caden Salter in from Liberty here to compete with Julian Lewis. It could be that Julian Lewis comes in and wins the job. And maybe this is a little more like Sawyer Robertson, Daquan Finn, when everybody thinks Finn's going to be the guy, and Sawyer Robertson steals the job from him. Whatever, either way, but you've definitely added insurance at the very, very worst with this. This is a former top 50 kid, started at Tennessee, put up huge numbers at Liberty the last 4 years, took him to the Fiesta Bowl, as I mentioned. So forget what the totality of this whole team is going to look like, which I still think they've got a chance to make that happen. They've got a top 15 portal class right now. It's no Texas Tech portal class. It's one thing Tech can say, man, we are kicking Coach Prime's butt in the portal right now. But still pretty good. Still a pretty good class. Colorado's taking hits, man. No doubt about it. There will be losses here. You've got both Sanders kids. You've got Travis Hunter, Nikhai Hill-Green, who was arguably the best defensive player for Colorado. Great linebacker. He's in the portal. That one surprised me this week. I suppose he could still come back. We'll see. And he also could be going to the NFL, which I think was an assumption from a lot of Colorado fans there. I don't know what exactly is going to happen with Nikhai Hill-Green. But you may be losing basically your best defensive player there as well. And the defense was much improved this past year. So there will be things, if we're talking about the actual nuts and bolts of the team, that need to be figured out. But I think the quarterback offensive star power, for the sake of the league and what it's going to look like and how much entertainment value and TV viewership you can drain out of Colorado, that's really important. So love him or hate him, you should respect that. Now, the only thing that can stop this is if Bill Belichick completely replaces the novelty of Coach Prime being here. And that's too new and too shiny of a toy this year for everybody to be distracted by. And you're already seeing a lot of this start to happen. Will there be enough attention to go around basically for Prime and Belichick? Two guys that bring so much novelty and are not in the SEC or Big Ten, which are always going to draw no matter what. Fascination this year is going to be with North Carolina and what happens there. And it's not even about like, hey, directly competing for TV slots necessarily. Like, you know, ACC and Big 12 are on different TV deals, though, you know, you've got ESPN involved in both of them. But it's about whether or not the shine kind of like, Coach Prime, all right, cool. We've seen it before. They're a pretty good program. All right, yeah, you know, they've got good players, but it's not as exciting. It's not as flashy as Travis Hunter. So we're going to go over here and see how this dude in a hoodie actually does trying to talk to 18-year-olds with his 25-year-old girlfriend on the sideline. That may be what really happens this year. We've got short attention spans as a society. Everybody knows that. And there is so much focus on what's going on with Belichick. Like I listen to a lot of college football podcasts. I, at times, will listen to Andy and Ari on 3. I do enjoy them. I opened up their feed yesterday, I think it was, when I was looking to see, all right, what have they been talking about? What could I listen to here? They did 5 straight podcasts about Bill Belichick. 5 straight. And only one of those was before he took the job. So it was like will he actually take this North Carolina job? And then 4 straight, ripped them off in a row, Bill Belichick podcasts, because that's how much people are fascinated by this and how much people really care. So will that suck away too much attention from the casuals? You know, because we're talking about here casuals tuning in to watch Coach Prime, people who live in the YouTube comment sections to tell you that you're hating on Colorado if you don't pick them to win 15 games every single year. You know, it's the casual crowd. Will they now start to gravitate toward Belichick and be like, well, you know, the NFL fan is like, you know, if Ohio State and Michigan are playing, I'll watch, I suppose. Nice little appetizer for me. They're interested in Dion. Now maybe they will be so interested in Belichick, they won't care as much about tuning in to watch the Coach Prime show. As I mentioned, I couldn't find full TV numbers from the Pac-12 year for Coach Prime, but it was at around 8 million through like the first 6 games of that season. So, I mean, that's pretty crazy. And it was around 4 million last year in the Big 12. So there was a definite drop off there, at least to some extent. I'd be curious what the full year numbers looked like in the Pac-12 last year. There's already been some of that. It'll be year 3. And then the other factor here is these type of hires are becoming more and more common. Like I don't know if everybody saw that Norfolk State hired none other than Michael Vick to be its head coach. So you're going to get more and more of this. I think especially as we're in this new era of college football where it's not, you know, people are open to trying new ideas here. Recruiting is not the same. If you can just have money, you're basically signing players like it would be professionally in this crazy unrestricted free agency period. That makes people more open to taking on unique sorts of head coaches like that. So that may diminish some of the novelty value over time. But for next year anyway, I was happy for the conference's sake that Coach Prime locked down another high-profile quarterback. Click the $ below the chat box if you want to join in on things tonight in that chat room. If you're on Twitter, which a bunch of you are, I would suggest gravitating over to John Kurtz on YouTube. If you want to be a part of the chat tonight, appreciate everybody who is here. If you could like the video, that would be amazing. Totally free. Great way to support. Subscribe to my Big 12 newsletter, Open for Business, ofbnews.com. In order to do that, 3,200 plus Big 12 subscribers already there. So I appreciate everybody who is doing that. And make sure that you are subscribed to the channel if you are here. Double check, even if you think that you are not. Starter 179. What's up, Starter 179? Starter 179 says one story that flew under the radar is Baron Morton had surgery in LA this week with, I assume that's Tom Brady and Kobe Bryant's doctor. Hopefully this improves his shoulder. Hammond playing. Okay. Yeah. It also just does seem like Baron Morton just gets hurt every single year, no matter what. Now, he's a tough SOB and played through a lot, and played a lot this year. I'm sure a good chunk of it not feeling his best. My question with Baron Morton has always been the ultimate ceiling with him. I've told you guys that before. There will still be some of those questions for me, but damn, you're putting so much around him all across that entire roster that you're doing. Texas Tech is doing everything that they possibly could be and should be doing to make Baron Morton as effective as possible. So, I hope nothing but the best for him. He deserves a healthy season. He deserves all the shoulder health in the world there for sure. So thank you. Thank you, Starter 179. Boy, I like this, Tim. This is tagging on a little late to the discussion from earlier, but the Michigan team that TCU beat was basically the same team that eliminated Alabama the next year. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. And yet we still have Nick Saban sitting here complaining about TCU getting in 2022. Shut up, Nick. Shut up, buddy. Get back to college game day. Okay, my friend. Don't worry about that. Anyway, good comments there, Tim. Good comments. So the Big 12 is a bit of a trendsetter here with something that we're seeing pop up in college athletics now in this revenue sharing era, right, that we're about to enter into. Schools are going to need $20.5 million to pay athletes up to the full revenue sharing mark. The Big 12 seems to be at the forefront of an important trend that is being shaped by the need for cash. All these schools have the need for cash. And this trend is not something I ever thought that I would see. Not something I ever thought that I would live to see the day of in college athletics. And it's about coaching salaries, guys. These guys make a lot of money. I don't know how much attention all of you pay to the crazy numbers. It's already been discussed tonight. Jimbo Fisher got, I believe it was $76 million to go away from Texas A&M, 76 or 78. It's believed that Lincoln Riley's buyout right now is $88 million. $88 million. 6-6 Lincoln Riley has USC in a chokehold with that thing, man. That is a crazy amount of money. And we just saw Bill Belichick get $10 million a year from North Carolina. 3 of it guaranteed, basically. It's a lot of money, man. It's a lot of money. Coaching salaries have been getting crazier for a long time. And, guess we just assumed they would all continue to climb and get wilder and wilder, even as that era up through about 2021 when like Brian Kelly, Lincoln Riley, Jimbo Fisher were all getting hired, were like these 10-year guaranteed contracts where you get these insane buyouts on those things. But we're seeing plenty of evidence now that the tide is really turning with all of that. And a lot of it is coming from right here in the Big 12. For instance, like West Virginia just hired Rich Rod. I had missed his salary number until just a second ago, or at least if I had seen it, it didn't fully register with me. And I was like, man, okay. West Virginia's paying Rich Rod $3.5 million. That's pretty reasonable. That's less than what Neil Brown was making. Neil Brown got up to $4 million. That's less than Neil Brown. It would have ranked 15th in the Big 12 this past year. Rich Rod's salary. Now, West Virginia is also making a huge investment into revenue sharing and what they're going to pay athletes. So they're doing that with some big help, right? Arizona Diamondbacks owner, Pat McAfee, got a lot of guys to help there, but also it helps when you're not paying your head coach $10 million. If you're paying Rich Rod $3.5 million, it's a pretty good bargain, man. It's a pretty good bargain. Mike Gundy just renegotiated his contract. He was making $7.75 million. Side note on that. I do a little bit of work in real estate, and I saw it was on Zillow Gone Wild recently within the last year. Mike Gundy's house that he was selling in Stillwater came up. It is obscenely large and just grand. Gundy's house was insane. The guy's making a lot of money. He's made a lot of money for a long time, $7.75 million, but no longer. Part of that whole negotiation, are you going to stick around? Will we try to fire you with cause? It was to renegotiate his deal so that he can give some of that money back to NIL for the players. It was reported. that he was on board to do that, but they wanted him to give more than what his idea of giving back to that was. So he's being forced now to take a salary cut and give a lot of that money to players. Mike Norvell at Florida State. This is not in the Big 12, but Mike Norvell at Florida State. This just happened. I mean, the guy had a disaster of a year. He's giving back $4.5 million. $4.5 million that he is taking from his pocket and giving it to his players by throwing that back in toward revenue sharing NIL. This is happening now. This is a trend. Now, if you want to look at this and say, okay, John, but these are guys that didn't have really a ton of leverage. All right, like, fair enough. There is a part of that at play here. Like, obviously, Mike Gundy didn't have a whole lot of leverage when the other option was, hey, bud, the school's going to try and fire you basically for cause. On whether or not they have stable grounds to do that or not, I don't know, but you're going to be gone and you're going to have to like fight a lawsuit at the same time. That doesn't sound very appealing. So it's either that or just give in and give your players money, which you were already open to, like opening the door on doing that anyway. Mike Gundy did not have much leverage. Mike Norvell, again, another guy that I don't know the Florida State had any way to fire him with cause, but they've shown in conference realignment they don't really need legitimate reason to do anything. They'll start digging. You know, they'll find some nepotism charge to throw at Mike Norvell like they did toward John Swofford in the ACC. Not a lot of leverage there when you win 2 games. Mike Norvell was also in a tough spot. And Rich Rod didn't exactly have a bunch of suitors beating down his door, right? He's going to take whatever, as long as it's somewhat within the realm of what other coaches are making. Rich Rod's going to take whatever it is that you offer him there to be your head coach. Beats the hell out of where his coaching career kind of was after going out in a blaze of glory at Arizona. But this still, to me, no matter what you want to say about how much leverage guys did or did not have, this is pretty fascinating that this is happening. And it will be a really interesting trend to watch throughout the sport, because think about how much the power dynamic has shifted in college football just in the last like 5 to 10 years. Like, I can still remember, K-State example here, but I can still remember it was like 2017, the Corey Sutton thing. Bill Snyder not wanting to grant a release to Corey Sutton, a receiver, to be able to transfer. Remember, that was a thing. Like, you would have to get a release from your school. So like the coaches could control your destiny and or just like limit destinations for you as a transfer. It was not that long ago, man. 2017, that's not that long ago. And anyway, there's a lot of controversy there because of some things Snyder said, like, you know, kind of running him down a bit in the media. That was not that long ago. And now we're here where not only can the players just get paid whatever, like literally whatever, just open season, they're revenue sharing. They can transfer at the drop of a hat whenever they want, wherever they want, as many times as they want. They've got all the power. Coaches have nothing anymore. Nothing. And they're still getting paid well, but now they're even losing their salary. They're having to pay money back to the players. And I'm not saying I have anything wrong with that at all. I have no issues with that. But if you're just taking a like neutral perspective on this, taking a step back, that is a wild change from where the sport was forever, but even just not that long ago. Somebody was always going to have to foot the bill for $20.5 million being paid to players, right? Like, the money was going to have to come from somewhere. And a lot of this you knew was going to be from facilities, because that was the old way to just spend all this frivolous money that was in the sport, in addition to obviously coaches. But hey, just dump it into all we can do. We can't really directly pay the players. So like, we got to use this somewhere. Let's just build the best facilities to give us recruiting advantages that way. You knew that facilities would take it on the chin. I would not have guessed that you were going to see coaches start taking it on the chin like this. Now, I'm not crying over it. You know, Mike Gundy's going to be just fine. He's going to be just fine. Mike Norvell is going to be just fine, even while giving back $4.5 million. I get it. But I do also kind of wonder, like, will this be another thing? Will it get to the point where this will be another thing that makes coaches want to turn away? You know, there's always been this, I would say it's an overblown narrative, but a narrative out there like, you know, coaches are not as gung-ho on coaching in college football anymore because of everything they have to deal with. And if they're having to deal with it. And now you're saying, hey, take a big chunk, 40% of your paycheck, and you're going to have to pay it out. You will have to get rid of that. I don't know. Maybe there will be more coaches starting to leave. Maybe that leads to more Bill Belichick, Mike Vick, Deion Sanders coaches coming in, guys that wouldn't necessarily need the money that are outside the box. Just something to keep your eye on, how the dynamics will continue to shift in the sport over all of this. The Big 12 is at the forefront of it. Click the $ below the chat box if you have something, if you want to be on the show tonight. Starter 179 in here again. I appreciate you, man. Do you think all Big 12 schools will be able to pay the full house settlement, $22 million a year? Well, the number right now that's being thrown out officially by everybody is 20.5 for this first year. Which schools won't be able to afford it? It's probably unfair for me to totally speculate on this. What I can tell you is I did directly ask Brett Yormark that question at Big 12 basketball media days in October in Kansas City. And he said basically we're going to commit to competing at the highest level, but he kind of stopped short of saying, yeah, everybody will be able to hit that. They did not know that as a guarantee at that point. So I don't know. It seems like Houston would be one school that I would wonder a bit about where their commitment is at on that. Dana Holgerson kind of questioned that. I think, Texas Tech taking Sheil Wood was in large part because of money there. Will they be able to commit enough to it? That is one school that I would wonder about. But I would guess that most Big 12 schools are going to at least come close. And some of this is why, Brett Yormark had been peeking into private equity. I mean, they're looking at all these different ways they can help the schools out in doing it. It certainly seems like there's a better chance than I would have initially thought that most, if not all, schools are at least going to be there. West Virginia is another one. Ren Baker said recently that that is definitely their plan, intending to get to that. So I would think you're going to see it's just going to become the cost of doing business. Come hell or high water, you're going to have to figure out some way to do it because schools in the Big 12 are doing it in large numbers there. So appreciate you, Starter 179. It's a good question. It's a really good question. Okay. I've got one last real take for you here. It's about conference realignment. So I would say any school that is not a blue blood here should probably listen up, particularly any school that is not in the Big Ten or the SEC, but maybe even some of those schools at the bottom of the Big Ten or SEC in terms of prestige. There's a new realignment fear here. What is playing out with Oregon State and now Washington State is a cautionary tale to everybody. It's just more carnage to the conference realignment landscape. And I feel horrible for Washington State and Oregon State, who dealt with more of this last year. Feel horrible for them. 2 days after Wake Forest's Dave Clawson announced his resignation, Wake Forest hired Washington State's Jake Dickert as his replacement today. I was shocked to see this because I don't look nothing against Wake Forest. I am not trying to get, I don't know how many Wake Forest fans are online. That seems like a school that may not be as chronically online as a lot of people, and good on them for it. I'm not trying to turn this into some big anti-Wake Forest show or referendum on them. But I would think if you're having some success at Washington State, you might wait around for a job that's going to be something that gives you a higher upside than Wake Forest. Now, Dave Clawson did some good things. I watched them with my own two eyes play for an ACC championship. I know that Dave Clawson did a phenomenal job there. It can be done, but it's not easy. That sure is not easy. And Jake Dickert is not a guy who has any sort of background in that part of the country. Was looking through his coaching career before this today. He's very much like a Dakotas, Midwest kind of guy. West Coast a little bit. Southwest a little bit. He is not a guy that you would think would be all that interested here, but it just feels like this was hey, he's been there 3 years now. This feels like man, I can't deal with this. My roster is just going to get picked over every single offseason, and I I can't stand in and have that be my reality. That's not going to be the best way to do this as a coach. And, John Mateer, their quarterback, already had announced he's in the portal. Everybody thinks he was going to Oklahoma to follow his offensive coordinator there. That's another thing. He had just lost his offensive coordinator, hired away by Brent Venables. So not only is your roster going to get picked over, your coaching staff's going to get picked over every year. And it's going to become really tough to just reset every single year. It feels like, to me, reading the tea leaves based on taking this job, that's really what happened with Jake Dickert. He was 8-4 this year, took over midway through 21 after the whole Nick Rolovich thing. He got promoted to permanent head coach, did a nice job. And man, I mean, this just comes right on the heels of Jonathan Smith leaving Oregon State last year. Jonathan Smith being an alum of Oregon State and still leaving them high and dry last year. You knew that Washington State and Oregon State were going to deal with some of this. I didn't think it would be this much, this fast, where they're just getting poached left and right. Maybe it was for the better that they lost DJU at quarterback, but obviously he did leave last offseason to go to Florida State. They're high-profile quarterbacks, they're high-profile coordinators, they're high-profile coaches getting poached. And Wake Forest, I was listening to my buddy Josh Graham, who does a phenomenal job, one of the best radio hosts in the country, who's in the Triad and spends a lot of time covering Wake Forest. And I heard a clip of him yesterday talking about hey, Jeff Monken is the guy. Running the triple option here at Wake Forest would actually make a lot of sense, because this is the type of job where you're just never going to have a lot of options, no pun intended, to win big. You're going to have to find ways to win in the margins. It's a better way to say it. You're going to need to find ways to win in the margins. You don't have a lot of advantages. And so coming in and running the triple option, this might be the type of place where actually that makes a ton of sense. Bring a guy in here from the one of the armed forces that knows how to run the option. Do that. That was the conversation that was being had there beforehand. And all of a sudden, Jake Dickert's like, yeah, sign me up. I got to get out of here. I can't keep having every single thing rated of mine. It's brutal, man. It's brutal. And I'm not trying to really fearmonger here or anything crazy, but this is, had July 2021, August 2021 gone a little bit differently, it's what the Hateful Eight schools could all be dealing with right now, potentially, or would have already been dealing with. And it is one of those things as you start to look down the road, what's going to happen with the Big Ten SEC? Will they slam the door after adding just, 4, 5, 6 more teams, something like that? Is that how it will really work out? Will they just slam the door right now based on how it is? Go do their own thing. I think you would still get your Florida State, North Carolinas of the world in there somehow. But when that happens, you get the point I'm making. Everybody else here, this is sobering. This is sobering if you are a school that feels like you may not ever have a total life raft. Now, the way back to the question that was just asked about revenue sharing and the way that the Big 12 seems to be stepping up, with most schools finding a way, or certainly professing they're going to find a way to hit those numbers. If you can keep doing that, that will certainly help. But if there really truly is a different national championship system, playoff, whatever, that you literally don't have access to, that's gonna hurt. And stuff like this will start to happen. Maybe not totally to this level, but it will definitely start to happen. And it is something that you want to avoid at all costs. And it sucks, man. I really, truly do feel sorry for Wazoo and Oregon State on that. So, yeah. Okay. My last thing for you. Let's have a little bit of fun. I don't know if I want to do this first one. So I had bold predictions. I asked you guys in August to give me your biggest bold predictions for the Big 12 season. And I got a lot of great answers that were really funny to go back and look at. Not even just because some of them are wrong. People took some chances and I laughed at them at the time and they wound up being pretty correct. Now, the first one, I just said I feel bad for him, but I put this on my list, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. One of the biggest online Oregon State fans, Digital Dam, said Oregon State would finish top 3 alongside Utah and Oklahoma State. Oregon State did not have a good year. Utah did not have a good year. Oklahoma State had a dreadful year. So actually, I mean, yes, Oregon State, if you want to make the argument in the Big 12 this year, they could have finished alongside Utah and Oklahoma State. It does appear that was correct. Unfortunately, not really in the way that he was thinking there or going for there. Here's this one. Zane, pretty smart. Who would have seen this on August 11th and said, yes, Zane, that's it? Well, apparently 3 people did. But yes, Zane, great take. Utah finishes in the bottom half of the Big 12 standings. Picked to win the league. They finish in the bottom half of the Big 12 standings. Zane, you deserve a freaking round of applause for that one, man. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Let's see if I can make this a little clearer for you guys. There you go. Well done. Well done. You deserve a round of applause there, Zane. I certainly thought that was crazy at the time. I was very high on Utah in the offseason. Here's another Utah one. Matthew says Utah loses 3 in conference. Kansas and Arizona lose 4 each. And West Virginia and Oklahoma State play for the Big 12 title. UCF is the surprise team, and BYU wins the Holy War. It's like, man, what a mixed bag of stuff all over the place there where you're like, okay, it starts with Utah loses 3 in conference. Like, okay, yeah, like pretty good. Yeah, I mean, obviously they had a bad year. Kansas and Arizona lose 4 each. Like, yeah, you're on the right track there. Neither team made a bowl game. And then you're like, just stop, Matthew, stop. It's like the Walter White gif where he's in the car trying to yell, like, stop. West Virginia and Oklahoma State play for the Big 12 title. No, Matthew. No, you were doing so well, man. That was on the rails, on its way toward being just a great, solid, bold prediction. Then UCF is the surprise team in the conference. Like, no, Matthew, we're too far gone. You redeemed yourself a bit with BYU wins the Holy War at the end. Obviously, you redeemed yourself there, but we were so close. We were so close to that being executed nearly flawlessly. A lot of Utah. I went a lot of Utah here because my guy Cole, shout out to my guy Cole, he said Cam Rising is not Utah's starting QB by the end of the regular season. It was great. How about saying Cam Rising is not Utah's starting QB by the end of September? Because that's what we could have done, and it still would have been accurate. Cam Rising is not Utah's starting QB by the end of September. Would have been accurate. And finally, Chris Mosley, DeQuan Finn of Baylor will be first team All Big 12 QB. What's funny is Baylor wound up with a quarterback that for the last month and a half of the season played like he could have been the first team All Big 12 quarterback. It just wasn't DeQuan Finn. It was Sawyer Robertson. And to show you like how impressive it is that Sawyer Robertson won that job and played the way he did, like DeQuan Finn is visiting Michigan. Saw that today. Hey, that's still a guy that's pretty highly thought of. He's visiting Michigan. Okay. So I love going out on a limb. I liked this one a lot. I used this in the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, which you can subscribe to at ofbnews.com or click the link in the description of this video. I liked this one so much, I responded to it and was like, that is exactly what I mean with bold prediction, and that's a good one that I think might have an outside shot at coming true. It didn't, but I appreciate the big swing. And, still worked out pretty well for Baylor. Baylor's also doing pretty well in the portal right now, by the way, if you are paying attention to that. So anyway, some good bold predictions from all you guys. Great stuff. Thank you, everybody, for being here. A couple of reminders on the way out. Please like the video. Please, if you didn't catch this live and you want your question or comment to be a part of the next show, go to Venmo, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. You can leave a question or comment with your donation there, and I will kick off the next show with it so you can stay involved. Appreciate everybody who does help out that way. Could not do it without your incredible support. Like the video, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and make sure I see all you Twitter folks that are in here. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com, if you want the next installment of the Big 12 Anonymous Basketball Player Survey. It has been a hoot so far, man. Asking them all the important questions. Which Big 12 coach would you like to play for that is not your current head coach? Who is going to win the league? Meanest fans in the league? We got into a lot of it. So ofbnews.com to subscribe there, or click the link in the description of this video. It's going to wrap it up for me. Guys, next time I talk to you in a live format, it's going to be after we watched college football playoff games. Enjoy all of that. Have a great sports weekend. It's going to be an excellent sports weekend with a ton going on. And I will talk to you all soon. Take care.